Some practitioners were very quietly trying to hold conferences, just like the old days, at great risk, tremendous risk, right? While others were working directly on documenting the persecution, and others, sort of the, if you like, the kind of the foot soldiers of the thing, were mainly the peasants coming streaming into Beijing. The initial arrests in China did not mean such serious consequences. They might be brought in, they'd be roughed up a little bit. If they wouldn't sign the transformation statement, they were often let go initially. It was the repeat offenders who started to get into real trouble. The conflict shifts from Tiananmen Square itself into the prison system, into the labor camps. This is where the real resistance began. In a prison, no one can hear you scream, and no one can see your pain, and I'm sure that point was made again and again and again in prison. Your sacrifice is utterly useless. And so it seemed. But in fact, certain people, and you see this in Zhao Ming's case, you see this in quite a few cases actually, put up such a resistance, were so stubborn, so difficult to defeat, that they started to slow down the entire system. Hardened criminals will work them over. They know they won't fight back. They're nonviolent, they won't fight back. The shipments of cattle prods start appearing. The system starts to have trouble. And you can even see this reflected in the memos that are coming out of the security forces at the time, which are identifying Falun Gong as a really, really difficult problem.
You try to visit a prisoner, you try to visit someone in a labor camp, you try to, some people get sentenced to prison, people lose their jobs, money confiscated, torture, all of it. It's all run by the 610 office.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs is a part of 610 office system, majorly in propaganda role, as a propaganda machine overseas. When I came to Sydney in 2001, there was a new role in the political issue, that's the Falun Gong issue. So there's a role of persecuting Falun Gong, even here in Sydney. If there's any Falun Gong activities, we will be there monitoring to report back to China, and also according to the policy, any specific instruction from the central government must take any countermeasures, including try all the ways to influence the local government to limit the Falun Gong activity, to convince the local councillors, members of the parliament, that Falun Gong is abnormal, is evil, that Falun Gong should also be banned in Australia. So that's one of the major roles actually I played in the consulate. That's totally against my conscience.
I feel guilty when at the beginning period, I followed very strictly of the government policy of persecuting Falun Gong people here. You will find there are a lot of Chinese secret agents and the Chinese consulate staff were hiding somewhere.
After 3 years in prison, after I came back, and I was told by some people, they had access to the secret file, inside the Chinese communist regime, and they told me the information was from Oakland, California, which means there were spies watching us all the time. So whatever we did, they just report to the communist regime.
There's full surveillance on it, right? Every time they start to use cell phones, they're rounded up because Motorola has given the GPS coordinates, given the Chinese police the way to use the GPS coordinates to do that accurately.
I was in Australia a couple of weeks ago and I met Jennifer Zhang. You may know Jennifer also went through the same kind of experience that you went through, Annie, and she was caught by an internet email that was sent by somebody else. And if I'm not mistaken, the government of China spends millions and millions of dollars a year on this gruesome internet censoring system.
Cisco set up a system so that you can basically track every communique on the internet and use it for arrests. They've actually specifically given it to the 610 office at this point, and they've even, according to our 610 officer now in Australia, they actually have created an actual list of Falun Gong practitioners as sort of a database.
Canadian company Nortel has helped the government of China to develop a filtering system whereby Falun Gong practitioners and others can be caught.
People feel that if they criticize China, something bad will happen to them. I call that the China magic. They were very determined that not in terms of the Chinese, but that in terms of British opinion, that they would be known to have tackled the Chinese on human rights. That they just didn't do it, and that everything they said was a lie, that they in fact did not bring up these matters, but that they wanted the press, and including me, to think that they had. The China magic is what makes the Chinese impervious to criticism that would be leveled easily at any other country.
No one wants to lose the money that comes from China, and that is perfectly understandable, except that you should also consider that you cannot just shut down protests because a lot of money is involved.
When the Chinese practice persecution, torture, execution on people with whom they disagree, I think this has to be confronted and just spoken about and written about.